This is Kathy from Gadgets Top 321, and in today's video I'm going to be using White Lightning ink additive that's made by Vanness Pen Shop. I'll be using it to try to get my sample of Sailor Shikiori Yozakura to perform better in my pen. I've got this ink in my Kaweco AL Sport. I was writing with it earlier today and I wrote until it went dry, and so I just set it aside. You can see the ink in the converter doesn't readily flow back and forth. Now I'm going to check it and see if, as the pen's set here for a few hours, if any of it seeped into the feed. No, it's dry. So what I'm going to do is use this toothpick and get just a small amount of this ink additive and add it to the converter. Now normally, if you're going to be using this White Lightning, you would probably know ahead of time that you have an ink that isn't flowing very well. Instead of adding this lubricant directly to the ink bottle, get a sample of your ink and add just a drop to it in a sample vial, and then ink up your pen from there. But since I already have some in my converter, I am just going to add it directly to the converter. I'm going to get a napkin here. And you can see why my pen was running dry. There should be, normally when you pull out a converter that has ink in it, the ink is all the way up here. That's where there's a little air bubble has formed, and because the ink's not very flowy, it's not flowing into the mouth of the converter. That air bubble's not able to easily float up to where the rest of the air is. Okay, let me get my stuff out of the way. The directions are pretty simple. The concentration should be less than 1%, so like 1 part White Lightning to 100 parts ink. So let me see. I'm just going to drip some onto the end of my toothpick. Okay, and you may or may not be able to see, there's a tiny little drop on the end of my toothpick. There we go. I've heard you can also use dish detergent, and that's pretty cool. When I don't think you could even see that. When there's an air bubble here I'm trying to pop. When the White Lightning hit the ink, it flowed back down. Now look how watery that is. All right. Now this is very slippery. I'm going to wipe off some of the lubricant that is dripped onto the converter. Being careful not to push the end of this converter. This isn't a threaded converter. It's like a syringe. Now I'm going to go ahead, and there's a little bit of ink here in the mouth of the converter. I think that's going to have quite a bit of lubricant in it. I'm going to go ahead and soak that part up. If I were wanting to do this right, I would probably let this set for a little while. But since this is mainly just for experimental purposes, and I tell you what, this might be too watery. I've got enough room here in the converter. I'm going to add just a drop more ink. To make sure it's mixed up fairly well, I'm going to draw some out and put it back in a couple times. All right. Wow, it saturated the feed pretty quickly, so that's a good sign. Now I'm just curious to see how it performs on the paper, if it's going to feather much. I'm going to do a bit of quicker writing or just scribbling and see if it feels like it starts to run dry. It looks like it's keeping up. Let's see. Yeah. Now I'm going to turn back to the beginning of this book when I did a little writing sample before I added the white lightning, and see if there's any difference in the color or appearance of the ink. There is a difference. Let me put my pen down for a second. I don't know. I guess the best way for me to describe this is when you add the white lightning or any lubricant, you can see it looks more like magic marker ink. It really soaks into the paper. It will make it more prone to feathering, and I think you're going to have less shading. You see up here where I didn't use the white lightning, you see more shading. The ink has more character, and it just looks more liquidy, more feathery down here. Now, keep in mind, I added a little drip of the white lightning to a tiny amount in the converter. Remember, the recommendation is 1 part of white lightning to 100 parts or 99 parts ink. So if you add just a little bit to a sample vial of ink, you'll have better results. You'll have more control. So it works. It makes the ink more usable. You just have to be very careful with how much you add to your ink. It doesn't take much at all. All right, before I end the video, I'm going to try just a little more writing just to make sure that I can't run this dry. Okay, I wasn't able to run it dry, so I think this little experiment has been a success. One thing I'd also want to point out is I bought this White Lightning because I had a bottle of ink that it felt dry when I was writing with it. I didn't have any trouble with the ink skipping or not flowing correctly like I've had with this ink. And I bought the White Lightning thinking it would make the ink feel smoother. That's not really what White Lightning is made to do. It's made to, like we saw in this pen, it'll cause the ink to have less surface tension and just flow in the converter more easily. Okay, if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.